So we're live streaming.
I hope we're not going to be here 3.5 hours.
No,
Again.
no, we won't.
You folks are the ones in charge of that.
No, I think.
I just would like the record to reflect that I was not here and participated in that.
Right. And I Jody wants to
Marathon
3.5
budget
hours.
meeting. I about fell out of my cabin.
All right, enough conversation. I'd like to, before I call this meeting to order, welcome our world travelers, Mayor Pro Tem Paulson and Council Member Rochelle in their remote parts of the world. I'm glad they're able to be with us by Zoom and participate in what is really the most significant of our budget workshops, other than the adoption of the budget itself. So this is where we get a chance to see kind of what the city manager and the department heads actually are proposing. So with that preamble, I would like to call this special meeting of the Sandy Springs City Council to order for Tuesday, May 14th, 2024, and turn it over to the city manager for the budget workshop number 2.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good afternoon, members of council, staff, and any members of the public who are participating via Zoom with us today. We are happy to have Mayor Pro Tem Paulson and Councilwoman Rochelle joining us so we can continue development of our FY25 budget. Caroline, next slide, please. Just a recap for everybody, and yes, you do see this slide in every budget workshop that we go through, because I want to make sure that the public and our staff and our council members see the calendar that we are following. Today, we are at budget workshop 2. And we will next Tuesday present the line item detail based on the final feedback that you give us before we finish formulating the line item budget that you'll see as part of budget workshop 3, which will be at 3 p.m. in a special call meeting next Tuesday. The first public hearing on the FY25 budget will be on June the 4th at 6 p.m. And then our second public hearing and the budget adoption will be June 28th at 6 p.m.
18.
Excuse me. Yes, thank you. June 18th. Next slide, please, Caroline. The purpose of today's workshop is to receive additional feedback and direction from council as we continue working to develop the FY25 budget. We are going to review and validate our FY25 budget planning assumptions, both our operational and our capital. We're also going to talk through the additional questions that council posed during workshop number 1 and after workshop number 1, and we'll review the ballot results that are at the end of your slide presentation today. Next slide, please. As we have always done since the city was incorporated, we are very conservative budgeters. We conservatively estimate our revenues and our expenditures so that we ensure that we do not have ugly budget surprises at the end of the fiscal year. And what I mean by that is that we underestimate our revenues and overestimate our expenditures to ensure that we are able to stay within our budget plans. We also do not use one-time revenue sources for ongoing expenses. When we do have a non-recurring source of revenue, we are only using that for capital projects, so that when you see use of fund balance, which we consider a one-time revenue source, those dollars are used to fund capital projects. Next slide, please.
Eden,
Yes, sir.
let me, I think I'm going to throw a softball question.
Okay.
The governor's office reported a decline in revenues this past week. Much of it in the income tax, but also in the sales tax. Have you already taken into account a lowered projection? Like, we're not an income tax city, but on the sales tax side, what are your assumptions? And either this week or in the future week, will you be showing us a little more detail about your sales tax assumptions so we compare our projected trends to what we're seeing at the state level?
So yes and yes. Next Tuesday, you will see our projection that we are estimating for revenue to be received for sales tax income next year for FY25. And then, yes, we have already in the FY25 budget that we're working from right now, we are already budgeting less than what was actually received in FY24.
Okay.
That's 4 months in a row, the state revenue's been downward, so. That's why I'm.
But I guess, and then the question next week when we see that, if there's any information that would merit a further review of those numbers, given the situation with the state.
Yes, we'll have very specific detail. Tony and I met this morning and began pulling that information. So you'll be able to compare the prior 3 fiscal years with month by month collections, and we'll show the increase or decrease in comparison to.
Right, and since our sales tax, I think, are all tied to sales that
They
occur
are
in this county of Fulton,
correct.
how I would be, if there is information and if it's significant, I would be interested if there's information that would demonstrate a comparison of Fulton County trends versus the statewide. Obviously, the statewide's a much larger sample than Fulton County, and to see if there's a difference on the trends.
Yes.
Thank you.
And then one other complexity to add to that is the fact that if you recall, when we went through local option sales tax negotiation almost 2 years ago, we were to see a slight increase in our percentage share for last year and this year. And then it will start going down, but because of growth, we will not see a decrease in the amount that we are collecting.
Thank you.
But we will walk through that next Tuesday. Okay, next slide, Caroline. In our last budget workshop, we had a question about the number of open records requests that are received by the city and how they are processed. On the table that you see on the slide here, we have seen a good bit of growth from 2021 to 2023 in total open records requests that have been received by the city. The biggest driver of the increase between 2022 and 2023 is related to the fact that our records management system at the police department was taken down for public access through what many people refer to as P2C, police to citizen. And during that upgrade process, it took longer than anticipated. So therefore, folks who were requesting police reports for crashes or other types of incidences shifted over to the traditional open records request. That is what is really driving that big change there. P2C came back online in March of 2024, and our hope is that as the public realizes that is there, that they'll be shifting back over to P2C to get those. Regardless, we are ensuring that the public and whoever needs access to crash reports or other police data have the access to the information that they need. Yes, sir.
I'm under the impression that human resources is privileged information. Do we honor open records requests for human resources for personnel information? I thought, because we don't even discuss that in council meetings. We go into executive session to discuss human resource issues.
Under Georgia law, an employee's personnel file is not privileged information with the exception of certain information in there. Home address, social security number, date of birth, those type of personally identifiable information can be redacted. But if someone files an open records request for an employee's disciplinary file or pay history, under Georgia law, we have to disclose that.
Even pay?
Yes, sir.
We don't even discuss that in council meetings.
Maybe we should.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, absolutely. So what we have broken down here are, in essence, our top 10 departments that receive. You'll notice that the city clerk's office and the finance department are not reflected in this list, but that's because almost every request that comes in is somehow touched by finance, and they are absolutely touched by the city clerk's office. So there is a significant amount of staff time that is devoted to responding to open records requests. If you go to the next slide, please, Caroline. Just to remind everyone, the fees that we can charge are mostly set by state law. For accident reports, that is $5, dash and body camera footage at $15. The cost to produce these records can only be calculated at the hourly rate of the lowest salaried or hourly individual who can produce the records. In addition, we cannot charge for the first 15 minutes that it takes to pull the information, and we can only require advance payment for those requests where the estimate to produce the records will be more than $500 or more. Once a charge gets to $25 or more, we advise the requester what the cost is and then wait for approval from them to proceed with producing the records. At the bottom of the slide, you see the tally of the fees that were collected. Obviously, providing access to this critical information is not meant to be a moneymaker for the city because we want to make sure that the public has access to the records that they need. Next slide, please.
So we're
We
not
had-
covering our costs here.
No, sir. The
Okay.
next, we had a number of questions that were asked about the Performing Arts Center and the usage of our venues. The table that you see here is a comparison of Byers Theater use, both rental and city events broken down by month. There is times where you may have more than one event in a day. For example, if there was a setup for a rental, which is also a rental event, for example, City Springs Theater Company may be moving into a space in the afternoon, but in the morning, we may have had a different rental event, either in the lobby or in the theater space. So that gives you an explanation for why you may see what looks to be significant amount of use. There is a lot of use that's happening within the theater, but it does show that there is demand for our spaces. Next slide, please, Caroline. The next table, which I realize is a little bit difficult to read on the screen, but you do have your copies in front of you, shows the breakdown in pack space utilization by days, both for Byers Theater and Lobby, Byers Lobby only, Studio Theater and Lobby, Studio Lobby, Terrace Meeting Room, City Green, City Bar, Entertainment Lawn, and Heritage Hall. The bottom line that you have there is that we are up almost 100 additional days in 2023 over 22. Next slide, please. We had a request for a breakdown of profit and loss for PAC performances. These are performances that are produced by our Performing Arts Center, not rental events that are held in Byers Theater. For example, Dave Cause had net ticket sales of 73,000. We had other revenue, which would include ticketing fees, concessions, that would be alcoholic or snacks or other beverages that might have been purchased, and merchandise concessions of $6,300, expenses of 19,000, an artist fee of 45,000, which led to a net income from that event of $15,000.
Kaden, is that, are in expenses, are those direct expenses or is there any load charge to,
Those are direct
right,
expenses.
so just to be clear, there's no load from the cost of operating a PAC department. Forget facilities, electricity, lighting,
No.
obviously no debt service, so Bill and his team, no, but event staff, yes.
That are working it.
Okay,
That's
so-
exactly right.
So it's event related, it's an event only related P and L, is that right?
Yes, they can.
And I don't know,
have that.
that, for example, there could be, there, if we were to get into the situation where we had sponsorships and the like, that also would be above line.
Mhm.
Right, so, but this is a P and L that does not take into account
Overhead.
overhead and facilities.
Yes.
Thank you.
On somebody like Kevin Hart, it says we lost $11,700 on there. I thought we just rented the theater to him and he did his own sales and expenses, et cetera. How did we lose $11,000 if we didn't hire him?
Unfortunately, what happened there is that there appeared to be some issues with the ticketing system, and our team is still working through this, where folks came through, they bought a ticket, and then they requested a chargeback, so they wanted a refund off of them. So we're hopeful that we'll be able to pull that down so that it's actually not a loss to the city. You'll notice that it was actually one of our highest nights for alcoholic sales, or excuse me, concession sales, but that was the net outcome of it because of the chargebacks there.
He collected the fees and we paid the sales
Yes.
chargebacks.
Yes, sir.
Sounds like a great deal.
Which is why we are very diligently working to get those chargeback numbers back to us. Down at the bottom, you'll note the ice skating rink, and the total amount that you see as the operating loss for the last fiscal year is excluding first year expenses, which will not be reoccurring. So our plan is to secure a sponsor so that we will not see such a loss in the operations of the ice rink next year.
It's interesting.
E-
Go ahead.
Eden, you wanted to hire 7 more people, right, for that?
Not for the ice rink.
I thought you wanted to hire part-time people for the ice rink. No.
It's the same amount of people that we had last year to operate the ice rink. Hold on, I'm flipping back over to that page.
Okay. And how much are the one-time costs?
The
The
one
first year,
time,
is that the 31,000?
yes, ma'am, 31,904.
Yeah, but that's not in the 135.
Correct.
Wow. That's a big number.
I think you did.
So do you think that we should do it again next year with this kind of loss?
I do. I think it was extremely successful considering it was our first year. Word of mouth this year and additional advertising is just going to have more folks come out and skate.
Is that why we lost money? You think there weren't enough people?
But the numbers were high.
It's hard to know exactly why we lost money on it. I think part of it was the one-time cost. And it was also, we had days that we were operating where we didn't sell a lot of tickets. So for example, on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, those were very active high ticket sale days. But Wednesday and Thursday were not. So we still had staff that we were paying for, even though we were not fully sold out for ice skating sessions. So this year we are planning to adjust the number of skate sessions that are offered to better match the times that people want to come skate.
Eden, so a quick question then. Are you going to come back to us with a plan for the skating rink for next year in terms of days to be open and days to be closed, like you just said? And also, did it run too long? Should we have cut it off a week earlier or maybe started it a week later or something like that? Please come back to us with a plan and an estimate for next year, because I enjoyed it. I think it's worth doing another year, but let's see if we can take that 134,000 down quite a bit.
Absolutely. And yes, sir, that is our plan.
I don't see. Yeah, Edie,
Mhm.
questions. One was, are we looking at the weather? Because there were days where it was really warm and it was kind of like a lot of water, or there was rain and it was too cold. So have we done any factoring into like the weather into how that can impact this? I don't know if we were monitoring that.
We were monitoring that. We were trying to minimize last year the number of days that we had to close. Unfortunately, we can't really predict what happens with weather. And if it got above 60 degrees, it was a very slushy experience for folks. We didn't have to close that many days last year because of weather, but we'll pull all of that and get that for you in the next,
I just meant there to be low attendance too on
on
those.
those days. Yes, ma'am.
Does the gross profit, does that include, do we have a breakout of any of the concessions? Is that included?
That's included. And yes, we'll get that breakdown for you.
Eden, can you go back one slide to the
Mr.
packed
Paulson,
space
Mr. Paulson,
utilization?
hold out. Mr. Paulson. Dr. Kelly, you've spoken. Now it's Dr. Kelly's turn. We'll catch you.
Okay. Okay.
Thanks, John. I just want to be clear, so there's no money from the general fund that's expected to go to the Performing Arts Center.
Last year was the first year.
And then
we-
we're doing that again, so
Yes,
we're not paying any money from the
Correct.
general fund.
No,
Okay.
but there is a transfer from the hotel motel.
Right, and
Which
you
is-
all are using reserves as well.
Yes.
Okay, great. So one of the questions that I brought up in our last meeting was just around the original vision, and, there was this expectation to, at least for a while, provide a small subsidy, and we're not doing that, and maybe that's good or bad, but the question I always wonder is, to what degree should we cover things like the loss or the loss from the skating rink? Do things like that speak to the need for a small subsidy, or even the ticketing system you just mentioned? How much would it cost to go ahead and get a state-of-the-art ticketing system so we don't have that issue again? Do those things speak to the need for a small subsidy as envisioned? And then also on some of the
Let her answer that question.
Okay.
So from a management perspective, you always want your enterprise funds, which in essence this is operated as, to support themselves, which is why I would suggest we not continuously give a transfer out of the general fund unless it is truly needed. Now, of course, if council desires to do something differently, we can certainly look at that.
Okay.
Next question.
Those, I guess my thinking is I want the Performing Arts Center to, operate at its best,
Yep.
whatever that means and whatever that takes. But when I look at some of the data, the rental versus city events, for example, question I have is, okay, well then what's the goal? I mean, when you think about the amount of, in other words, I don't know what to compare it to sort of figure out how successful we are in terms of how are you all measuring your success? How about that? That's particularly as it relates to the rental and utilization numbers.
Well, my answer to that is the growth in the usage. As you know, when we opened the facility in 2018, shortly thereafter, we had COVID come in, and we really are just more or less in our first season, so to speak. We're in like our second or third now. And I think the amount of growth that we are seeing in usage of the facilities is quite impressive for a space like this.
Mr. Paulson?
Thank you, Mayor. Going back to capacity utilization, if you go back to slide 9, you can see the max usage was, 105, 111. Let's assume that reasonable capacity utilization is 100 events a month times 12. That would give you a ceiling of 1,200 events a year to give you effectively, acceptable capacity or maybe maximum capacity utilization. Is it reasonable to assume that 1,200 is the maximum capacity utilization, or is it 1,300, or what's the ceiling here?
That's my question.
I'm looking at Bill because I'm trying to figure out exactly what you're saying. Are you saying from a staff perspective or from a space perspective? Is 1,200 a year the max that we could do, or both?
Yeah, well, at one point when we first opened, we were running this thing ragged, and people were quitting, people working 18-hour days. So obviously we were exceeding the capacity of the facility. Then we dropped off with COVID. Now we're coming back. I'm trying to get an idea based on these numbers of 105 to 110, 11 to 101 to 108. Is 100 events a month reasonable? Or is that too low? Should it be 110? But what would a good target be that if we utilize this facility 1,200 times a year, everybody would say, yeah, that's about right for us. Any more than that, and we're stressing everybody, and any less than that, we're not optimizing. I'm trying to figure what the number is. How do we know when we're successful and optimally successful?
Let us go back and do some additional analysis of this table in particular, along with ticket sales. We had planned to have the update on the number of ticket sales sold during 23 and year-to-date 24. But ran into a challenge with our outside vendor for ticketing. So I want to do the comparison between the two of them and show you that information. But we will include that in the presentation next week.
Well, keep in mind that we've got 4 performance venues plus a conference center. You have multiple events at each one of those. So trying to calculate the number of actual opportunities is different, John, than I think what you're asking, which is combining the number of opportunities with the staff availability to manage them. Is that really what you're asking?
Yeah, what's the sweet spot between those two things? Utilizing the facility effectively and also not wearing out staff. What is that? And would this number, if this were 1,200, would Bill be happy? If this were 1,500, would it, I just don't know. So I'm asking you to go back and give us an idea of what Bill thinks a good number would be to shoot for, and come back to us with his opinion on that.
And I'd also be curious, just to add on about.
Kelly, I need to recognize Mr. Bauman before I get back to you.
Good discussion. on the topic of, we've said this a few times, that no subsidy has been required, and yet we do the transfer from the hotel motel and this. But when we advertise no subsidy, is overhead in that number?
No, staff is charged out of, or do you mean the facility itself?
No, I mean, Bill's team, when we're saying no subsidy, what does that mean? What are the factors in that equation? What are the inputs, what are the income, and what are the expenses?
So, the Performing Arts Center fully takes care of their staff.
Right,
So no subsidy comes from the city to cover the overhead.
for
any
events,
Any full-time employee.
right, but I'm sorry, so how many people in your team, Bill? That are full-time running the whole operation?
10 or 12, I think.
Are they in that number for no subsidy?
Yes.
Correct. They're coming out of the Performing Arts Center fund,
Oh, so.
their salaries.
So we're, okay, so that's very encouraging, if that's the way it is. On the skating rink, I have a question. So very, very few communities, I love the skating rink. I thought it was great, the hot chocolate, the whole idea of people out there activating the green was great. Having said that, we are one of the very few communities in the metro area that has a skating rink. Did we reach out to, Stefano, on this go? I know we had talked back in, before COVID, when we were first doing this, I think he was in the loop on this, but was he consulted, and or are we just doing this completely independent of the skating rink without any consideration for them? Stefano owns the ice rink we have.
Oh, yes, we did meet with them
On this go around?
after we came out with it. Yes, Mayor Paul and I met with, what's his name?
We had a conversation with them about it, and they had concerns, no question.
Did we address those? I mean, because I think we are drawing I suspect we are drawing some incremental skaters, but also I don't want to be.
Well, also trying to grow the pot by having people come out here and.
I get it. I wanted to know how robust our conversation was with
We
the
met for
one
about an hour.
skating, what?
We met for about an hour, covered,
After we started it?
well, after it was announced, yes.
I'll leave it at that for
All
now.
right,
Thanks.
Dr. Kelly.
Oh, so back to the conversation about the sweet spot. I'm interested in just also getting a better understanding of what our strongest limiting factor is. I know we mentioned staff quite a few times, but there's also parking and the spaces. So it probably is staff, but I'm curious about that when you work your data.
Okay,
All right, let's move on.
all right. Next slide, please, Caroline. Next is signature events. You all had asked for an update on the number of days of events. So what we have shown, we added a new column that says number of days, because some of the events, such as Farmers Market, happened 30 times in 2023, and that's what that column reflects. And the number of attendees that you see in the next two columns reflect the average daily attendance to each market. So we have not added up a total of all of the attendees for all of the events, but these are also estimates so that you all have the numbers in front of you. Okay. Next slide, please, Caroline. We received a question about Abernathy South Greenway and Old Riverside Park. The funds that are currently budgeted, what we are proposing for FY25, as well as our current project budget, including design, permitting, and at the bottom, a timeline for when we anticipate beginning and having construction completed. Next slide, Old Riverside Park, same information as on Abernathy South Greenway. We currently have $4 million budgeted from the impact fee fund for FY24, proposing another 2.5 million in a capital assumption for FY25. And the current project budget is broken down there, along with major project milestones at the bottom. Next slide.
Do we have 4 million in our impact fund?
We do.
How much do we have in that fund?
You know,
Well, that was what was available and we moved it over to Old Riverside.
So that cleans it out, basically?
Next slide is a breakdown of the technical services line for the police department. You'll recall in the budget workshop 1, we were showing an enhancement to the technical services here. We've broken this down by the divisions within the police department that utilize the softwares being requested. The largest driver of the increase this year is the renewal of the contract with Axon. And it is a transition of the current TASER product that is in use by the police department to the latest and greatest, along with upgrades to their cameras, both dash cameras, fleet cameras, and body worn cameras. So that gives you the total for technical services of 2.1 million. Next slide, please. Chris is going to come up and walk us through some information and updates about our stormwater system inventory.
Mr. Mayor, council members, good afternoon. Appreciate y'all's time. Several questions came up during the last workshop and since then regarding the stormwater system, particularly in relation to what we're proposing for 2025. But the questions broadened out into a larger context of, what is it that we have? What are the information we have on our stormwater system? And what are we doing to manage that and use that to inform our budgeting proposals to you all? This is a screenshot from our GIS system just to show you our inventory of pipes in the city. It's hard to see, but it is a large database, and we wanted to give you sort of a eagle's eye view of that. And so our inventory, what we've discovered since these discussions started, is we found some stormwater documents from 2010. Those were actually prepared by the contractor that was helping the city stand up and provide services to the citizens. And they produced a study that really was focused on forming a stormwater unit, how to organize that department, and the requirements to implement that service to the citizens. It did contain a limited stormwater inventory, but the condition assessments in that inventory were based on the age of this particular system and the lifespan of the materials. There weren't a lot of specific video inspections and visual inspections of the actual pipes done at that time. And what we do have is a GIS inventory. And to give you an idea of the scale, we currently in our inventory have 22,000 pipes that sum total 1.7 million linear feet of pipes in the city. 10,000 of those pipes and about 500,000 linear feet are the city's responsibility, the ones that we know of. Structures, catch basins, head walls, things of that nature. We know about 33,000 of those, and about 8,700 of them are the cities. So it's a pretty large database. We got a significant number of assets to keep track of. Currently, our stormwater unit is running called an MS4 program, Municipal Separated Storm Sewer Program. And that is a federal requirement that's enforced by the state, EPD. And part of that requires us to inspect 20% of our stormwater system every year, such that we're looking at our stormwater system at least once every 5 years. We are keeping up with that, and we file an annual report with the state to prove that. But as the staff does this, they do add data to the GIS system as they go along. And that does include observation of the pipes and the materials that are out there. So our recommendation for stormwater system inventory is that we supplement our GIS system with visual condition assessments of the pipes. We can use this data to forecast costs for maintenance. So our current program is much like any other city in Georgia. It's reactive. We respond to a problem, we assess it, we design it, and we fix it. During that process, we do look at the system immediately around the problem, but we don't can't afford the staff time and the resources to go and do an exhaustive search around that area. Additional data would help us in becoming more proactive. So we looked at some options for that data collection. One of them is to put out an RFP and collect it all as one fell swoop. Another option is to collect it over time in conjunction with our MS4 programs. We take small bites at it until we get it into our inventory. And what we're proposing is that we collect it with a camera video condition and assign values to that condition using something much like what we do with our PCI program. with a graded scale that we can track with industry norms and understand when to prioritize any proactive maintenance on pipes. And we do believe that outsourcing that effort, as I mentioned, to private contractors who have that equipment and that expertise is the right approach to do that, rather than trying to buy the equipment, hire staff and train them ourselves for something of that nature. And jump one too quickly. However, in your budget, you'll see that we are proposing a $4.25 million amount for 2025. That is a reactive number. We do have a full slate of projects for that value on our books for 2025. However, if there is a desire to pursue this effort, we're already working to understand the scope and size of that work to do that inventory so that we can report back to you. I just don't have any definitive numbers to give you today. If you've got any questions, I'll be happy to take them. Yes, ma'am.
So when you go back one slide to the numbers.
Yes.
Now, quite a bit is not city responsibility, assuming that would stay the same with we go forward.
That's correct.
So the question is, how are the non-city maintained impacting us? Like somebody has a problem and it causes a washout in a road or something, then we now have to incur costs because something on their part failed.
Sometimes that does happen, and that's identified when we see a problem. It doesn't always get identified as something that costs us a lot of money to fix. Sometimes it's a code complaint, compliance complaint, or somebody calls the call center and they take out a ticket for a drainage problem. And if that's the case, then that gets reported over to code enforcement to inform the private property owner of their responsibility.
It's just surprising, just shocking that it's like, well, a lot of this is out of our hands and we're doing a reactive mode, obviously. They're probably even more than reactive.
Well, the tragedy is that most people who have the responsibility for that other, don't know that they have the responsibility for it until it fails.
Yes.
That's right.
And it comes as quite a shock when they have the responsibility for repairing a storm lane system across their property. But that's Georgia law, and we have no ability to go onto a private property and fix their problem, which they don't even know it's their problem because their developer put the pipe in.
That's right.
And then nobody informed them that they were taking on that responsibility when they bought the property. I have one running right diagonally across mine. And it's a corrugated metal pipe, and at some point, it's gonna cost a lot of money to fix.
That's right.
Chris, I have a question.
Yes.
And once we do this, how often will it need to be done?
Once we get the data collected, what I would recommend long-term is that it be incorporated into our MS4 program such that we can keep that data updated once every 5 years. So I would suggest a same kind of approach going forward. And I said, one option is to just incorporate into the program, but that means it takes us 5 years to get a full assessment inventory. But even if we do it all at once, I'd recommend we still do that 20% a year approach.
Now, since we don't have the responsibility for a lot of these, do we still inventory the property on the pipes on his personal property?
So,
And do we need an easement from him to go ahead and do this? So do we need, 5,000 easements to survey all this thing here, or do we just cut it off at property lines?
this study I'm talking about, this GIS supplement to the condition, would be focused on the pipes the city owns and is responsible for.
And so we would not go onto private property, we would not
Do
look
not,
at the.
No, sir, I
pipes
would
on-
not
on
recommend that.
private property.
We have no authority to do that.
Well, I understand that, I just didn't know how you're gonna come up to your property line and stop and then go around and start again.
One day there will be a big crater in my front yard and I've got to go fix it.
It might
Well-
be helpful for Ginger to chime in a little bit on what authority we do have on private infrastructure that has been constructed since we were a city and we did the permitting. Ginger, do you mind?
Well, anytime that there's work that needs to be done on private property, we have the right to go on the property and inspect. And from a property maintenance perspective, have them repair the pipe up to the point where it is the city's responsibility. Unless, and that's typically if there isn't, there could be a Fulton County easement over a line, then they're kind of responsible for that line, but where it's a private line, the homeowner, the person's property that it's on, it's their responsibility to repair it.
Now, on some of the property, and I don't know where it is on your property, I'm gonna say it comes in from the street, which would be the city's responsibility, then it goes onto your property, which is your responsibility, and then maybe it goes on to another part that becomes the city's response. How is all of this? How's all this figured in?
Well, we usually have meetings with Public Works and Community Development and the property owners, whoever it is. If it's us, it's Public Works, but if it's the private property, then we're all kind of there in a room, kind of discussing what needs to be done. You know, and from this point, you gotta bring it to this point, and then we'll take it from that point. And so we have those kind of coordination efforts when it's needed.
Sounds very,
It gets
very time consuming and complicated and expensive.
Yes.
Well, it's also becomes very emotional when
Oh, yeah,
people think that the stormwater system is ours.
right.
And as you can see from those statistics, the majority of it
It's not.
is owned by private
Yeah.
homeowners, mostly.
Does this review in any way change the budget assumptions for the coming year?
No, the 4.25 does include money to do this,
Yeah.
to do the assessment.
How much is this gonna cost?
We're estimating around 250,000 to do the inventory, but that is an estimate.
So just the one effort. Okay.
Our team is working right now to talk with some industry professionals to try to get a better assessment of that number, but that's what we've got on the table in our budget right now to start working this issue next year.
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson,
So first things first, I think this is fantastic that we found this inventory that actually is there and you can actually put our hands on it. This informs our staff the next time anybody goes out in the field to whatever they see and observe, begin adding color commentary, for lack of a better description, to any pipe that they see. So now that we actually have a system in place and we have these things identified, then I'm not worried that we have to rush to do this collection. I'm just glad that we have a system, we have a first look at what our system actually is. And, you know, if it's only a couple $100,000 to give a more detailed inventory, maybe that's worthwhile. But for sure, anytime our people go out, you know, they go out and they look and they report back what they see, we'll get a pretty good idea pretty quickly about which ones are going to be causing us trouble. So, I commend you guys for finding this. You know, what gets measured gets done. So now that we've got this system in place, we can go out and tie a visual observation to a pipe on one of our spreadsheets. And then let's just keep collecting the data. It'll become obvious pretty quickly which ones are in need of repair more quickly than others. So that's my take on it. I think this is fantastic.
thank you.
So if we were to do the collection as one effort and we did all this really great information with the cameras, in theory, that could lead to sort of a proactive effort, in addition to our normal sort of reactive. I'm just trying to think it out, like in terms of similar like to what we do with pavement. So I really like the direction we're moving in that sense. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Yeah, we won't ever be able to get rid of the reactive part of taking care of stormwater. That's just the nature of the business.
Mhm.
But the more information we have, the better prepared we can be for some things that are out there that we don't know about.
Thank you, Mr. Owens.
Right.
Well,
Chris, I have a question. Can you hear me?
yes, ma'am.
Would we be able to offer this service to the residents for a fee if they paid? Like, would we be able to recommend this? Because I know there's a lot of people that call up and they have issues and they don't really know which way to turn, and this would be a good option for them.
That's a great question, but that's very similar to Councilman DeGiulio's question. it would get very complicated very quickly for them to grant us rights to go in their property. And then I'm sure that the legal ramifications and liability issues would far outweigh that. But much like some other things that residents call, we can refer them to ways to get things done. But I would hesitate to, as a city, to offer that as a service. Even
I was just suggesting that we refer them to this company, that this would be a good company for them to reach out to.
That may get problematic. I think even though your city attorney's not here, that would probably send him into heart palpitations to contemplate that. We might be able to develop a list of people who can provide that service, and then they would be able
Like a resource page.
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't think we should get into the business of recommending particular vendors or
Okay.
contractors.
Well, it'd be good to just be able to point people in the right direction then. So I think once people have this issue, they just don't know which way to turn. So if we could just recommend, have a list or whatever, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. All right, continue.
All right, moving along to slide 18 in your presentation. We received a question about the proposed position Director of Data Strategy and Analytics, asking if any other cities are doing similar work. This is just a sampling of cities that are doing similar work. We haven't come across any in Georgia yet that are doing what we are planning to do through this position. But City of Chattanooga, Austin, Texas, Palo Alto, California, Arlington, San Jose, and Alexandria, Virginia are all working towards this. To remind everyone, this position will be responsible for cohesively pulling together all of our data into one place so that it's easier for us to get the information that we need and council can make more informed decisions. This individual will also be our AI lead, helping us look at ways that we should be implementing artificial intelligence into the delivery of city services.
Virtually all of my meetings with people outside, it used to be with developers wanting to do things. Now it's data people who want to be able to come in and help us manage big data. And it is a huge challenge, but it's a massive opportunity to be able to understand all the data points that are out there and bring those together in some cohesive, actionable manner. So I pushed the city manager to move this direction so that we can do, we'll be on the point of the spear, but that's historically what Sandy Springs does, is find out where the opportunities are and lead in trying to get ahead of these things. And I can tell you from the meetings that I go to and the meetings that I have with outside people, this area is one of the fastest growing areas for municipalities to try and understand. City of San Jose, for example, I think I've used this before. They use AI to predict where potholes are going to occur.
Or what?
Where potholes are going to occur. They take their PCI data, run it through an analytics program, and it can pinpoint where the subsurface is weak enough so they can fix it before it becomes pothole. That's the sort of thing that we're trying to figure out how we can be. When we talk about use the term proactive, that's precisely what this sort of thing leads to.
I think this is a great idea.
Ms. Mueller.
So I just, a slight concern is that someone who's usually very deep in data analysis and building data marts and stores may have understand AI, but they're not the AI implementation person. So do we plan, because you mentioned this, they would also be in charge of the AI lead. Generally, that's not like their core competency, but they can do part of that.
Mm-hmm.
So will we have someone who will also be proficient in AI and municipality and implementation?
Yes, so in large part, all of your senior leadership team is starting to dive into this. I'm not planning to add another position to what you were saying. I want to start small and have a path forward before we throw into that. But in fact, today we sent out a survey to our senior leadership team to learn more about how they are using it, how they plan to use it. And then also, we've already drafted a policy on the ethical use of AI in local government that's based off of best practices that have already been prescribed through the U.S. Conference of Mayors and the Bloomberg Initiative to try and give us a framework. So we're starting to use this more, but it is going to take us a little bit of time.
Yeah, I mean, they'd have to work together, but
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
just saying, but, and then will we be able to share what you just, or will you share what you just said was drafted?
Yeah.
Just how to use it, like, I mean, I think that's great that we've developed that, but
Yes,
it's nice to see that.
yep, absolutely.
We're trying to get ahead of it. I mean, there are wonderful uses for AI, and there's also nefarious uses for AI. And what databases that you allow AI to access is crucial. And so that's where these guide rails are supposed to help us shape this in a way that it becomes a positive tool, not something that can be used nefariously. So we got a lot of work to do, but we're beginning the road down the journey. The road down the journey. That's right.
All right, next, our FY 25 capital budget assumption, excuse me. Just to recap, all of this is the same with the exception of two items on here. You'll notice on the facilities line for police shooting range and the scoping study, I've received a question and a comment about possibly splitting the cost of the scoping study between the city and the Sandy Springs Police Foundation, the newly constituted foundation. So we are changing the recommendation here to include $50,000 from the general fund to pay for this and the remaining $50,000 to come from the police foundation. Just to remind everyone, the purpose of the scoping study is to determine exactly the size that this needs to be, to give us some renderings that can be utilized by the police foundation as they go out and start doing fundraising to lead towards the eventual facility. Yes, sir.
Peter, thank you. So I'll take ownership of the question about the splitting of the money between the general fund and the police foundation. I think I approached Mayor Paul early about this, and I don't speak for you, but here we are, it's in here. That this police foundation is designed exactly for projects such as this. So I think that's a really good thing to set the tone and sort of set the framework from the get-go that I don't see any circumstances where the city's general fund will be paying for this. Now, having said that, and being all for police training, I mean, hands down, top priority. I am concerned in this case that we have gotten a little bit ahead. We're sort of out over our skis just a little bit, and that this was floated at the retreat almost as sort of like a done deal in the sense we're going to do the scoping. We've never had a briefing on sort of where we're going. You need to know where you're trying to get before you know how to get there. And it would be helpful to get some further, I'm fine allocating these funds, but it'd be helpful to get a little more insight to sort of what the path is in the sense that, you know, I don't know where houses, I assume for a lot more than how many lanes, shooting range lanes you need. But this body and clearly, if this body's not asked to put any money into it, we're still the council and deciding what is it we're trying to do. And, you know, if we're headed towards a $45 million facility, you know, is there a legit path to assembling that money anytime in the near future such that it would justify doing this $100,000? So I'm just putting a qualified yes to the concept, yes to the idea, but I feel like I don't feel like this body has been given really much of any information other than we need a scoping study. And there's been no input as to what it is where I think we have a sense of where we're putting it. But other than the retreat, unless I missed it, I don't recall any conversation on this topic. So I would be in favor of budgeting. I'm real glad that we're doing it in the 50-50 way. But with the request that, you know, before you release an RFP or a study bid, you at least come tell us in open session what we're doing.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So this might be more for Marty, I don't know if you answered, or maybe Chris, but I know that we have $50,000 for the guardrail replacement program, say that how many times fast. And one of the things with EVs, they're heavier. And so I read that there's, other municipalities have had to do some budgeting differences when they're going and replacing guardrails because they need to do heavier guardrails. I don't know if that's true or not, but so are we okay with 50,000 or do we think we need more because now we're having to put in stronger materials to account for the heavier cars and trucks?
Councilwoman, EV cars are not as heavy as the trucks that these guardrails have to deflect back into the roadway. And we follow national highway standards when we install, and GDOT, Georgia DOT standards when we install a guardrail. So unless something, Marty, you know of, I don't see a reason to beef up that program.
There's no standard changes yet. In many cases, especially with the budget line item you're talking about, Councilwoman, that's repair of an existing guardrail system. So if it gets damaged, some portion of that system is damaged by virtue of the accident.
So I guess what you're saying is the standards have not been updated federally to account for heavier vehicle, having to contain heavier vehicles.
And if there are replacement of systems required by virtue of updated standards due to vehicle weight increases, et cetera, more likely see that in the capital program that goes along with
If I understand what you're saying, these have to be strong enough to deflect a large truck.
Yes.
So an EV is lighter than a large truck, so it will be able to deflect those.
But there are large, a lot of rigs are being converted to electric, which they're going to be heavier as well. So that's down the road.
One additional change on this slide is at the bottom, pavement management program. We have reduced that amount by, previously it was $6,750,000. It's been reduced by $750,000. And this will still allow us to maintain a PCI rating of 80 because we are estimating a $1 million LMIG grant from the state, Local Maintenance Improvement Grant. That still will fit within our PCI schedule, which you'll be hearing about next Tuesday evening to keep us at a PCI rating of 80 with a $7 million per year investment.
Mr. Baumann.
So we didn't agree to go to 75. I thought we talked about that in our.
Ms. Rochelle, Mr. Baumann was, I know you can't see, Mr. Baumann was recognized, then you.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
So I monitored like these folks, although I was quiet, I monitored the last budget. When we had the 6.5, did we not in that number presume the 1 million to get to the 80 or did we not?
We did not.
Okay, so yes, I'm in favor of the, I'm in favor of keeping to the 80. I think we need to keep the highest standard of paving in the city. I think it's one of our core functions, so I support strongly the 80.
And
Ms. Rochelle.
So Councilwoman Rochelle, the additional discussion that was had on that topic indicated a desire to remain at 80. And that's what we have put in this proposal today. Once we get a little bit further along, I'll talk through exactly what the alternatives are. That's going to be on slide 28. So give me just a couple more minutes, okay?
Okay.
Council wants to change any of these numbers, there'll be an opportunity to have that debate and vote.
So I wanted to ask you about two other things, the outdoor art and the cistern improvements. When will we know how much the cistern improvements actually cost? And the outdoor art, are we still going to be doing the statues or did we decide to go a different route on that?
Currently, what is proposed is to continue the outdoor art program, the Arts in the Open, in partnership with Arts Sandy Springs. But if there is a majority of council that wishes to discontinue the outdoor art program, we can certainly do that.
It'll be something that once we start adopting the budget, I'll recognize motions and we'll vote.
How many How many outdoor sculptures do we actually have now?
I don't know that number up here, but we can get.
We'll pull that for you. I don't know the number either. I'm going to ask Dave to speak to the cistern improvements.
Yes, we're currently, we just finished draining the cistern. And we have companies coming in, contractors coming in to give us a proposal to clean the cistern out. We do have some percolation on the bottom of the cistern of water coming into it. But we're hiring a water type consultant to help us figure out what the remedy to that is. So until we have all those calculations, we really don't know exactly how much it's going to cost to repair to make it watertight. So, but right now, current situation is drained, and we're getting ready to release the contractors once we get the 3 bids in to come in. One of those contractors come in and pressure wash it and clean it so we can start assessing all the joints in it.
Will we know the number before we pass the final budget?
We will not.
Yeah, most likely not. This number is as a planning estimate is what we've included this year.
Okay.
Next slide, continuing with our capital budget assumptions. There have been no changes to this slide from before, other than the total at the bottom going down from 22,428,000 to 21,428,000. And that is as a result of LMIG being factored back in.
Mr. Bowman.
And thank you for indulging a couple extra comments since I wasn't here the first time on the initial set of assumptions. I want to mention, I've talked about this a few times and others have as well, over budget sessions and during retreats. And I see we have a small amount of money, 300,000 for Trail Segment 2C. We've got plans for, we're talking about master plan at Hammond Park. We know we've got lots and lots of deferred work and opportunities rather than challenges, but opportunities at Allen Road, at Hammond Park, at Morgan Falls. We're doing the Old Riverside and maybe some other things. And then, of course, a very, very ambitious trail system that has to be built out. And, you know, we can keep doing the pay-as-you-go at little chunks at a time each year, but at some point, the community probably needs to have a conversation about elevating this work and how can we find a funding mechanism, if that's what the community wants, to really bring our parks up to the level we inherited parks that neighboring communities have and that our community may aspire to, and also to build out the trail. So I don't want to build out the trails in something other than 100 years. I don't want to let the budget go by without mentioning it. I had I thought, good conversation with you, Mayor, when I got back, and there may be things, there are things in your experience that you know about that may not just be a GO bond, I think is the right term, that another line item on the taxes that the community would have to vote on. And whether you want to use this opportunity or not, I leave that to you, but I wanted to not let the budget go through without elevating the conversation around parks and trails.
The city manager and I had a conversation about funding opportunities to do more with parks. There's proposals in the Georgia General Assembly that would give us some flexibility in funding them without having to raise property taxes.
Mm-hmm.
We will not know until about this time next year whether those opportunities are available to us. But if the legislature does what some of the leadership is talking about, giving us some flexibility, then I think it would be something we could carry to the voters and see what they want to do.
Yeah, and
Right now, I'd be totally opposed to raising millage rates, which we can't do without a referendum anyway.
correct.
But there's some funding mechanisms that are being discussed at the state level to give us some flexibility. There's already one called the Flex law, local option sales tax. The problem with that one is it has to be countywide. We couldn't do it locally. There's one option that's being discussed that would allow Sandy Springs to hold a referendum only in Sandy Springs. If that occurs next year, then that's something we can talk about as a funding mechanism. We're doing more work on parks and on trails than we can do on a pay-as-you-go basis.
Well, I just wanted to elevate the conversation, and I know we may already have money set aside for a Hammond Park master plan.
We do.
Which is really an update of a 2009 master plan. And at some point, you can't just keep updating master plans. I think the possibilities for Hammond Park are very ambitious. And we're gonna have to find a way to pay for that, and that's really a community conversation.
Whatever's done will require a referendum. And we're looking at various funding mechanisms that do not touch on property taxes. Mr. Dr. Kelly.
I wanted to, since we are discussing capital budget items, do you know when we will be able to discuss the report, the housing report from the Georgia Tech student?
We can look at putting that on an upcoming work session.
Okay.
I'd like to offer the student the opportunity to come in and speak, but we haven't scheduled that yet.
Okay, cool. So maybe I have an interest in at least leaving open the possibility for moving forward with our planning exercise, bearing in mind that 2027 is around the corner and housing is a chunk, a nice little chunk of our comprehensive plan that hasn't really had any let's just put it like this, it hasn't had the momentum around it as, let's say, transportation or trails and stuff like that. So maybe considering an investment this fiscal year in advance of next year, which is when we really start that 10-year process.
Once we get to the budget, I will entertain motions that anybody can bring an idea, and if it's got 4 votes, we'll move forward.
Oh, thank you for explaining that to me. Appreciate that.
Okay.
Say count to 4. I love it. Thank you. I'll work it out.
All right, now the part that I know council always looks forward to every year, the results of the capital ballot. A recap for you, the items that were presented on your ballot this year. We originally had 1.8 million available for a projected 3.6 million in projects. Council members did take their ballot and rank. Oh, I don't know what that happened. I think I pressed the wrong thing. On slide 26, you see the individual scoring by council members for the projects, and then slide 27 is the outcome. Behind this slide, we have a number of slides that walk us through the individual projects that would be funded from the results of the capital ballot. Morgan Falls Dog Park was number 1. Ridgeview Park improvements came in 2nd. Updates to and rehab of our internally illuminated street name signs, 3rd. Perimeter small area plan 4, and then Roswell Road safety project, partial funding, but almost full funding.
And we'll be able to make up that.
I think we can do without
Think we can handle
the $1,600.
Okay.
Yes. So I promised to walk through with you some capital budget alternatives because we went back and took a closer look at our pavement management program, and we reduced it from $6,750,000 to $6 million in the general fund contribution, which will then require a $1 million amount from LMIG, which is based on prior trends, what we anticipate receiving every year. That would be required to get us to a PCI grade of 80. That gives council an additional $750,000, and below are simply some suggestions that might be open to you all if you would like to reallocate those funds. We could look at additional funding for City Springs district improvements for the public infrastructure and the demolition that will be needed for City Springs Phase 2. We could also, to Councilman Bauman's point, create a capital account for park infrastructure investments and start building into that. And then we could also begin setting aside funding for Fire Station 4 for construction once we identify a location for that. Happy to answer any questions and, of course, get your feedback on other ideas that you'd like to consider. So, Mayor and Council, the last few slides, would you like me to walk through these? You've all seen all of these already.
Hey, good work, good.
Okay. The first one that is funded with the capital ballot this year is Morgan Falls Dog Park improvements at a cost of $750,000. As council is aware, dog parks have been identified as a top 5 facility priority in our Recreation and Parks Master Plan. Our park patrons consistently request upgrades to our existing dog park, which is located below the falls at Morgan Falls Dam. Our preliminary concept plan was guided by significant public input, and the funding includes the cost of demolition and grading, replacement surfaces and fencing, new shade structures, drinking fountains, a dog wash station, dog agility equipment, site furnishings, and bioswales to help manage stormwater in the area.
This property is owned by Georgia Power, right?
It is, we have a
And
long-term.
we have a long-term lease, dollar lease. or
Yes,
something on it.
And they have to approve whatever we do there, correct?
Yes.
We had conversations with them about this?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, all right, just being sure.
Next is Ridgeview Park improvements. $400,000. These funds will be utilized to design and construct a bathroom facility at Ridgeview Park. That has been requested by our park patrons who utilize the playground, the tennis and pickleball courts, excuse me, new sport, tennis and pickleball courts, pavilion and trail system through the park. Next, internally illuminated street name signs. Let's try saying that 4 times fast. We currently have 339 existing internally illuminated street name signs at signalized intersections throughout the city. Approximately 80 still have the old PCID logo, 116 have our old 2005 logo, 57 have no logo, and 141 are not illuminated. Many of these older signs are failing and they have far exceeded their expected service life. This program will upgrade or install new signs at up to 5 intersections per year. And we are looking at some transitions to using a new retro-reflective high-intensity product that will allow us to replace additional signs and have a 20-year lifespan as opposed to a 10-year lifespan. Next is a perimeter small area plan, cost of $200,000. This was identified in the next 10 5-year work program as a priority area. As you heard, Mr. Ladson had out in our last council work session on the anticipated changes or the uncertainty within the office market. This plan will focus on reimagining the aging office and its competitiveness with the surrounding area, as well as feasibility of office conversion and potential repurposing. It also will include creative placemaking opportunities to make perimeter more attractive and work with the perimeter community improvement districts on the planning opportunities here, with, of course, the goal of increasing vibrancy, walkability, livability, and redevelopment of some of the outdated shopping centers in that area. Finally, the Roswell Road Safety Project, a concept study. This is for the intersection at Cliffwood Carpenter to Hammond Drive. Will be to identify a feasible alternative for safety and access improvements. It does complement GDOT's 285 Roswell Road interchange study, which is currently evaluating the segment of Roswell Road up to Cliffwood. The small area plan that was completed in 2017, and also the Roswell Road Access Management Plan in 2023. Any questions?
Yeah, I'd like to,
Yes, sir.
like to go back to the Ridgeview Park improvement.
Yes, sir.
Now, I ranked this one number 1 on my list because I know it's something that's desired, but I would encourage our park people to go back and study the past, because there was a restroom facility at that in the days when Fulton County was overseeing it, and when we first became a city, and it became a total disaster. I don't remember the exact details on it. One of the problems on it was keeping an eye on it, you know, somebody watching it, etc. It got terribly shabby and vandalized. And so I think we need to keep that in mind when we go ahead and design and construct this new facility there, so that we don't wind up with the same problems that Fulton County had and could not handle. And that's why it was taken down.
Okay.
I think good news for us is that now that we have pickleball courts over there,
Well,
there are a
that-
lot more eyes on that.
there's a
park.
lot more eyes on it, exactly, but still the eyes are not there 24/7.
That's right.
And so I think we need to really make sure we keep an eye on that facility
We will.
and,
Well, the park closes at
Pardon?
right dusk. So.
but that wasn't the problem.
I understand, but we may
They
be-
were coming in after.
I know, you can lock
Well,
it. After the park's closed, you lock it.
you can lock it so cars can't pull in, but can't lock it so people can't get in.
Yeah, you
Kids
can.
can't get in. That's what was tearing it
Oh,
apart.
no, you can lock the
Kids.
doors so that nobody can get in.
Yeah,
Unless they
well,
break the doors down.
I'm just saying
And
we
that
have to,
becomes these people's problem.
right? Well, I'm just saying we have to make sure that we take that into
No,
consideration.
It's a
when
good
we
point. It's
do
good.
this.
It's a very good point. It's a management-
Eden, Mayor Paul, are there any bathroom facilities down near the dog park and the start of the trail down there? We talked about that at one time and I don't remember if we added any.
There are not.
The closest facility is at Overlook Park.
Overlook.
Yeah.
That now we'll have a lovely trail that, you can walk from the dog park up to the restroom facility if you're interested in that.
Where would it be? Sorry.
At Overlook Park, the bathroom building at Overlook Park.
Oh, okay. I didn't know. I mean, I thought maybe that might be something we could do with the extra money if you think we need a bathroom down there.
We'll need to look at it and,
It's closed.
and it's in the floodway.
I don't think
Yeah,
there's.
that, you're gonna have a tough time getting a septic tank down there in that area. I'm not an engineer, but that just shows that's an EPD problem waiting to happen.
Pump it, expensive.
Yeah, and then you're in a floodplain and you don't want to put a septic system in there. So it may be a challenge. We may just have to put signage directing people up to the one at Overlook.
Either that or put one of those portable,
That's,
the construction ones.
that destroys the whole benefit of
I
upgrading the park.
understand.
All right, we'll try and figure something.
So
Good point.
I wanted to just confirm something from slide 26. So we're essentially saying with the 750,000, you are looking for some direction.
Yes.
As to, and a consensus, obviously, but yeah, to see what to think about, some opportunities for it. Okay. Thank you.
Any other
So
questions?
Eden, slide 21,
Yes, sir.
you have a total of 21,428.
Uh-huh.
What was it? Was it 750,000 more than this last week?
It was, yes, sir.
Okay, that's the only delta. That's 750,000.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Oh, actually, no, it was 750. The only other change was back on slide 20, but we're still showing 100,000 here, and that was for the police shooting range and the sim house, but we are planning to split that. And because it would have to be the 50,000 for the police foundation would have to be a transfer into the general fund. We're still showing it as 100,000 here. So those are the two changes, but the decrease is the 750 off of paving.
Right. Potentially you could have 800,000 when the 50 Gs gets moved over.
Yes.
Okay. All right. And then finally on slide 20, the City Springs District Improvement Demolition Infrastructure. That's kind of a plug number right there, I'm assuming, because we don't really have any details of where that 3 million would go. That's kind of a
exactly
best
right.
guess.
Yep, that is for demolition of the structures and what will be part of our contribution towards new streetscapes and other public areas that might be required.
Yeah, there's really no hard backup to that number. I'm not arguing. I'm just thinking it through. 3 million may not be enough. I don't know, but
It won't
we really
be,
don't have the ability to put a hard number in there just yet, do we?
it's a placeholder. Yes, it is. It's too soon to know. This is simply starting to put some funds aside that we will have available for use for that project
When will
Got
we getting some more information on that?
by the end of the month.
The end of the month, like in 2 weeks?
Yes.
Any other questions? Madam City,
I do.
Ms. Miller?
So when would be the time to bring up, is this what Mary, you said that people could be making motions? Would that be at the last meeting?
It'll be the 21st.
Okay.
Yes.
We start at 3 o'clock, to give everybody an opportunity to.
But
Well,
respectfully, I mean, I think, like to hear about, if people have ideas, I mean, I think we can start discussing it here. I mean,
well, no, it's not just, one of the things that I think that, we talked at the retreat about a lot of a lot of this properties in the city, the commercial properties, especially along Roswell Road, most of us have properties along Roswell Road, are very tired looking, they're very mature, I'm not using the other word, we went round and round about how to describe them. But I know that Decatur has their Downtown Development Authority, they have a grant program for commercial facade improvement. So I don't know, is that the time to, so would that be to bring up that to be?
Let me suggest this course. 1, put in writing what changes you would like.
Okay.
2, tell the city staff what you're gonna cut out of that budget to fund any additional spending.
well, right now there's 750.
700.
All right, yeah, but that's not gonna do small business grants or housing study or anything else. You got, if you're going to, make changes, you need to know what that change is specifically and where the money's coming from to fund it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Respectfully, and I think it's a fair question, and I think it's a fair response. I mean, because rather than just, if we get to the day of vote, we have budget sessions for open dialogue. This is effectively a work session, right? Right. So right now, we're in work session, whether it's a housing study or facade. I think we've been invited by the city manager to opine on a minimum of what sounds like $800,000. For which obviously I don't imagine.
And that can be the source.
I don't imagine.
You're gonna take it from.
I don't imagine, well, that's true. I don't imagine a housing study would be 800,000. I would hope not. But anything, so whether it's that or parks, whatever, I think what I hear you saying is ultimately this seems to be the budget moving forward, but this body has an opportunity here today. What is our session next week?
It's the full presentation of the budget.
Okay, so, but that's a work session. It's a special call work session.
It's a city council.
It's a city council meeting with,
And this is a city council.
all right, so this is a city council meeting where we could actually, if we want to take notes, I guess we could, but it's nonetheless a city council meeting in the public where any council member during council can bring things up. And this is a great time, as my understanding, this is the process where, particularly this year, since we've now clearly, we've made an adjustment, and whether it's taking it from this 800,000 or for somewhere else. Yes, let's all have this conversation so we don't hear it for the first time at the vote at the second meeting in June.
Mr. Bowman, you know my antipathy for legislating on the fly.
Right, so I think.
So I will rule any motions that are not circulated ahead of time out of order. So put your suggestions in writing, circulate them, and then we will consider it. We're not gonna be making changes on the fly.
Well, hold on a second, let me ask this question, and just to some. In and of itself, a motion, I agree that we should be, I mean, as a matter of good practice, we should be circulating this, which is why that whether it's here today, at next week's meeting, at any one of the public meetings that we have before, we should be vetting these things. Whether the motion's out of order or not, I would be interested to know whether it's out of order. But I think, I hear your intent, and I think it's great advice, and I agree, and I'll take that to heart too. I haven't really thought through it.
Here's the posture. If you want to rule you'll have to vote to overrule the ruling of the chair.
Fair enough.
Okay. So, because this is important stuff. This is where we set our priorities, and all 6 members of council should know ahead of time, and the public should know, to the extent that we can advertise them, what changes in the budget you're proposing, what they are, where the money will come from to do it.
Yeah, and what you first said, I'm glad, I actually agree with that. What you first said was just bring a motion at the budget. I think this more full explanation seems to make sense, is that whatever your posture is, let everybody know, get it out there, let the public hear it. We've got public hearings, but the public is gonna be able to chime in twice.
What I said was we will entertain motions. I just now said how we're gonna do it.
Sounds good, man.
Get your one pager together and circulate.
4 votes, you're home free.
About 3 plus a tie.
Don't depend on me. I'm in a no mood.
If I
Okay.
may also add, when you circulate, please make sure to include me so that
Oh,
we can
absolutely.
include it in the
Yes.
presentation.
The city manager will be the repository of
Yeah.
proposals.
Does the mayor have an idea for the 750,000 that is sort of our hanging chad?
Not that I'm willing to talk about right yet.
I hope you'll share with us before.
How about,
Will you share that with us before the,
Will we get your
Before-
one pager, Rusty?
If I have any ideas about it, yes.
or we could just leave it in reserve?
how about if we keep it in reserve
You
for
could.
a downturn in the economy?
It can,
That's always acceptable.
That could be your one pager, Timmy.
It doesn't even, only one sentence.
Okay.
All right, put them in writing, get them to the city manager.
by Friday.
Circulate them, and then we'll have an opportunity for everybody to review them.
And the reason I say Friday is I have to present this on Tuesday.
Right.
And so if there are any issues, Tony and I are gonna need
We
some
could do a ballot too. If there's projects, we could also do a new ballot.
Well, this gives the council the maximum flexibility to make changes to the budget. Yes, it could be a ballot item, but the truth is, you control the spending, and you should have the flexibility to make changes wherever. So that's the reason I'm not, we're keeping it to a ballot.
They just get
Okay?
And remember, it's OPM,
What's that mean?
other people.
other people's money,
Oh,
taxpayers.
oh,
All right, anything else?
No, sir.
All right, we are adjourned.
This may